You are listening to How to Feel Like a Midlife Goddess, the place where midlife women come to feel supported, inspired and understood. I'm Amanda. I'm a nutritionist and health coach and a champion of women like you in their 40s, 50s, 60s and beyond. And I'm here to remind you that you can feel like a midlife goddess at any age. And we know it's all about how you feel rather than how you look. So this is a podcast that's going to help you, step into your strongest, healthiest and most empowered midlife. And I hope I can give you the conversations that are going to help you do just that. So thank you for being here and I hope you enjoy the podcasts. Today I'm joined by Anna Mapson, a registered nutritional therapist who specialises in supporting people with IBS. Now, Anna works with clients from all over the world, helping them reduce unpredictable and often frustrating symptoms like bloating, constipation, excessive gas and abdominal pain. We all know a bit about those, don't we? So I think if you've got any kind of gut issues, whatever they might be, you're going to find this episode really interesting. Anna is super knowledgeable and explains very clearly what are the issues for many gut-related symptoms. So let's talk to Anna. Anna is joining us today from
Bristol.
Bristol, yes. And Anna is going to tell us all about IBS and gut health, and she's got lots of wisdom to share with us. So before we start, I'm sure everyone would like to know a bit more about you. Am I right in saying that you specialise in sort of gut health and IBS?
Yes, so everyone I work with has some of those sort of symptoms like constipation, bloating, gas, reflux, diarrhea. Those are like what I talk about all day long.
Yeah, very common.
I've been doing nutrition for about 10 years now. Okay. And prior to that, so I sort of worked in financial services, had a sort of very much like an office job, being management consultant, and then was ill for a little bit, took a little bit of time out and retrained, went into nutrition over 3 years. And whilst my kids were really young, which was, a bit of a challenge at the time, but then I've been doing this mostly online as well since COVID, which is, all online since COVID, but even before then, some of it was. So I work with people all over the world now, which I don't think we could have done before the pandemic. People didn't really see it as an option, but now I love it.
It's great, isn't it? Yeah, it's great. There's like no barriers to where anyone is. It's really good. Yeah. So what brought you into sort of, focusing on gut health, only gut health? Because obviously there's so many other things out there that a nutritionist deals with on a sort of day-to-day basis. But why have you sort of focused in on that?
Yeah, I was really drawn to IBS. I think partly because there is a lot of research around it and there's quite good evidence for what works and what doesn't. And it's so common as well, up to 1 in or 2 in 10 people in some studies have got IBS or will have had it at some point in their lifetime. So there's a kind of combination of lots of people have it and we do know some things and dietary techniques and there's a lot of research about it. So I just felt like it was a sort of perfect area for me that I can give really good evidence-based advice, but also there's a huge population of people who need it. And like we're just saying, I can work with people around the world. So you can specialize in someone who who does your sort of nutrition practice. Like as we were saying, sometimes people are a little bit more out there with their advice, and that's great because that's what some people are looking for. But you have to find the right kind of practitioner for you, and that's why I love being able to work with people from anywhere.
And so you're very much focused on a sort of evidence-based approach by the sounds of it. And you said that you were ill, Anna.
So this was when in between my 2 children were born, I had a molar pregnancy. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's where the placenta, it's like a miscarriage, but the placenta turns into a kind of tumour. So it was really bad. Had to have a year off work, had over 9 months of weekly chemotherapy, and it was really challenging. My eldest daughter was like 2.5 at the time, and so that was a complete life change, and that sort of made me reassess really, like, do I want to be making more money for insurance companies and in their financial operations, and came up with the thing that I didn't want to do that anymore.
I was asking because I just wondered if it was like gut related, but
No, and actually I don't have IBS. I've never had SIBO or IBS, and people often ask, is this something that affects you? And I can see why people ask, because a lot of the time practitioners are drawn to something that they've experienced, whether it's like skin conditions like eczema or psoriasis or whatever, and then they go into that niche. But I haven't, and I sort of sometimes liken it to like when you go and see a doctor, like you don't expect your cardiologist to have high cholesterol, or you don't expect your dermatologist to have had psoriasis. Sometimes they do, but it's not the only thing that can mean you understand what's going on in that practice.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. Well, I'm delighted to hear you're okay now. And
yes, and I had another child since then who's now nearly 13. So it was a long time ago, but obviously it's like one of those things that just sort of changes your life direction.
Yes. Really. Yeah. Well, I think it's good when these things happen, and sort of it's good to do something positive with them.
It
sounds like you've changed direction, and now you're helping lots of people with IBS. So before we start, can you tell people that are listening, because I think I see a lot of clients that think they have IBS, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. What would what are the sort of defining symptoms to say, yes, you definitely have IBS? And, why is it sort of different from like constipation or just gas, or, how would you differentiate?
There is a defined criteria for diagnosing IBS, which is called the Rome 4 criteria, and that's what doctors use. So they're looking for two types of things. Mostly it's about pain, but whether you've got IBS or whether you've got functional constipation, to you as an individual doesn't make that much difference. It doesn't mean you get different treatment or a different approach. It's more for a doctor's categorization. But they are looking for things like symptoms that happen at least once a week for the last 3 months recurrently, and also a lot of pain associated with going to the toilet, and often changes in your bowel habits, or something that's different, changes in the form and the appearance of your poo. So those are like the criteria. But symptom wise, the things that we see all the time is there's two main types, constipation and diarrhea predominant, but there's also a mixed type. So some people move between the two. But constipation, typically like hard, pebbly poos, maybe skipping a few days, like not going to the toilet, only going to the toilet once or twice a week. Very bloated, often with kind of bad smelling gas. And then the diarrhea type, maybe going to the toilet like 7 times a day. It's very loose, mushy. It doesn't have to be watery diarrhea like when you have a stomach bug or something like that. It can just be very loose and very frequent. And those are the sort of two extremes. And then some people will move between the two. So there is a mixed type, which is probably just as common. It's almost like a third of each type. That's normally what people get. But the symptoms like bloating, gas, often reflux, although that's not part of the IBS symptomology, but a lot of people do get it as well. And then pain, and just feeling like food upsets you as well. That's a really common one. Everything you eat sends your stomach into like pain or bloating, or makes you feel worse.
Yeah. So just so the listeners can understand, so it's, if you can just say it again. So if you have diarrhea, several times a day, that's kind of one type of IBS, and you've got pain, and every time you eat, it sort of triggers maybe a bowel movement. That could be considered
That's
IBS.
very common. The thought that every time you're eating, it kicks off. Sometimes people say everything I eat goes straight through me, but actually normally digestion processes take a long time. Even if you're someone who has frequent loose stools, the digestive process takes a couple of hours in your stomach, in your small intestine, another few hours. The large intestine could be 12 hours. So you might be having a lot of poos every day, but it's unlikely that food you've just eaten is what's coming straight out.
But that is the impression that people have. And why is that? And is that because the gut is already, the lining is a bit inflamed, and just anything just triggers a response?
It's often to do with the gastrocolic reflex. So this is our natural way of making room for food. As we put more in, more room is made by evacuating. And this is very common in babies. Like they actually will have a poo as they're eating their food, and that's very strong gastrocolic reflex. So typically it's strongest in the morning. Like after breakfast is a great time for people to have a poo, especially if they're a bit constipated. Is like that's when your body is naturally trying to move stuff along. So that's one reason. Like could be, as you said, like the lining is kind of being irritated by something, and the movement is causing it to trigger more bowel movements. Yeah, there's so many causes of IBS. That's the other tricky thing. It's like a collection of symptoms, this syndrome, and it's also a collection of causes. So
so we sort of talked about, what the diarrhea pattern might look like, and then the constipation. The constipation side, remind me what that looks like. So that's kind of like maybe going every other day, a bit pebbly, a lot of gas.
I mean, normal is like anything between 3 times a day to up to 3 times a week. Now that is clinically or medically normal, but I would say if you are not going every day or at least every other day, you're not going to feel great. So up to 3 times a week.
A lot of people though, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. But, I certainly see people that are not having daily bowel movements, and some are having like 2 a week, and the doctor might have told them that's normal.
It's normal, but you won't feel it's medically normal. But I have worked with people and they just have 1 bowel movement a week, and that is really uncomfortable. Imagine every time you're eating, it is just stacking up and getting. So whilst it might be considered normal, it doesn't relate to feeling good. And there's all sort of combinations of symptoms that can get worse the longer you're constipated. So impact on your hormones sometimes with like estrogen can also really impact on gas. So obviously if you're quite blocked up, the gas has got nowhere to go as well, and that makes you react to more food. So it's just challenging, I think.
Would you define that as IBS though? Because I'm saying I see a lot of people that are constipated, and hopefully after they've seen me a few sessions, we get things moving, and that makes a huge difference to, like you alluded to, like how you feel. If you can just get someone having a bowel movement every day, they're going to feel like, so many different symptoms are going to just disappear. They're going to feel so much better, aren't they?
Yes.
But would you define that as IBS if someone is constipated and they're only going a couple of times a week? Or
well, if they fitted into that criteria of it happening for more than 3 months, there's also pain associated with going to the toilet. So whether it's pain that's worse when you go or worse after you've allowed the poo out, and also that it's a change from what you were used to. I mean,
pain is key as well as in
the diagnostic terms, like that's part of it. But then there's functional constipation, which is pretty much the same but just without the pain. So it doesn't really make much difference to an individual what your title is.
And when we first talked, you talked about hidden causes of constipation. Maybe it's a good time to talk about those at this point.
I mean, there are a couple of things that people don't really realise could be causing constipation. One of the most common things for sort of midlife age is not eating enough. And if you've had a dodgy gut for a long time, then it's likely you've cut out quite a few foods. You think, I can't have onions, I can't have wheat, I'm not sure about dairy, I don't eat fruit because, again, like midlife, often people were trained to think fruit is fattening and too sweet, and so we mustn't eat that. Mustn't have any fat again. Then a really low fat diet can be a trigger for constipation because bile flow is one of the motility activators. It helps us move things through. And if you're not eating much fat, like your bile can get a bit sluggish, but just not eating enough volume of food as well.
And that is happening, isn't it, with people that are taking Ozempic and Mounjaro? They're having gallbladder issues, and it's all relating to the bile building up in the gallbladder. And they're just not eating enough because they're not getting that call to eat. So sort of
so it's effective for weight loss. But then it sort of slows down your gut to the extent that other problems can start. So sometimes people end up still feeling quite bloated, even though they're losing weight. Their tummy is bloated because it's
and also I've seen they don't. I don't know if you've got any experience of this, but people that I've been working with, they don't seem to digest fats very well. And
I think that can be down to that bile slowing down as well, that sluggish bile, which also happens through high estrogen. So, perimenopause, like your estrogen can be rocketing around, and then your bile can get sluggish because of that. And so that can cause constipation through the lack of motility, but also and the motility helps to keep the bile helps to keep the small intestine clean, because it's one of the sort of antimicrobial liquids that our body produces to clear things up as part of that migrating
so the
motor
gallbladder
complex.
produces bile. Well, the gallbladder stores the bile, and then when it's needed, it spurts out. When it detects
out, normally
fat.
when we eat. Yes. So if you haven't got a gallbladder, it will kind of drip out all the time. But if you have, then yes, it should come out, flowing out when we eat anything, and help us emulsify the fats to then be better absorbed and broken down.
Yeah. And again, I think a lot of people don't do that very well. I don't know if you experienced that.
Yeah, same. I've got a lot of people I work with have the pain, so sort of a upper right quadrant pain, and that was typically where your liver is. But even if you don't have gallstones, which are like acutely, incredibly painful, but they can have sludgy bile, which might just be a little bit of inflammation in the bile duct, or perhaps it's thicker bile that's struggling to get out, and that can create a bit more of a dull ache. So it's definitely worth getting that looked at. You can get a scan, and they will look from the outside,
pain normally on
the hand side,
on the right hand side, because that's where the gallbladder
where your liver
is,
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So the constipation can be not eating enough, sluggish gallbladder, or sluggish
other causes were like the high methane levels. So you may have something called intestinal methanogen overgrowth, which sometimes used to be called methane SIBO. So it's basically too many microbes that are producing a gas called methane. And it is a bit like an anesthetic for the gut. It kind of spasms it and stops it contracting in the way it should to move the food through. Like it slows that peristalsis. And that
peristalsis is that sort of involuntary movement, of squeezing of the bowel that we have no control over. It just kind of happens.
Yes, exactly. So we can't control it. If we could, that would solve a lot.
That'd be really helpful, wouldn't it? Press a button.
So that is another reason that people get slow transit and don't realise. Now, the other sort of situation you can get into is once you've got hard poo there, it's incredibly difficult to get it moving, and normally using laxatives is the only way to do that. And some people are a little bit worried about using them. They want to do things naturally, or they don't want to use over-the-counter medication. But actually, until you've got that blockage moving, it's very difficult to treat the constipation and like to change the diet, because everything you do is going to make you react. And so then you feel a bit more worried about every change that you're making, because you're not seeing a reduction in symptoms.
But what's your opinion on someone taking long-term?
I mean, there are different types of laxatives. So some are osmotic, which means they draw water into the bowel and soften it. And that's very helpful when you have hard impacted poo. But when you have a very slow transit time, there are other types of laxatives that are probably a bit more effective. So there's things like Movicol that kind of form a gel and help to create a bit of bulk, but also soft gel. And those can be taken, not forever, but they can be taken for weeks and months without negative effect. The ones that shouldn't be taken long term are senna-containing laxatives, and those are more stimulant laxatives, and they can impact the lining of the gut, maybe over time, over a really long time, make your bowel lose that motility, like lose the power to change them, to push the food through, because it comes a bit lazy.
And that's my experience as someone who's been taking like those old-fashioned kind of laxatives for years, and it's quite hard to reawaken that peristalsis, that movement, that involuntary movement of the bowel, so it's doing it itself, kind of thing. But
the other problem that people get, so Movicol, it is okay. I mean, sometimes people I work with are taking 4 a day to get things moving, and they need it. Sometimes it's just half a sachet a day, and not everybody needs it. And I'm trying to get people off it as quickly as possible, which always trying to taper it down. But it is sometimes one of the key things that helps sometimes just to get people moving.
I just quickly wanted to tell you about my latest idea, which is called Be Healthy with Amanda, because I've been thinking for a while, how can I support you regularly without seeing you in person, but still share my nutrition know-how in a useful and helpful way to you? So I created Be Healthy with Amanda, which is my new subscriber-only private podcast. And I think you'll find it's the perfect in-between, a podcast you can listen to anytime with the insight and guidance of a nutritionist every week. So every Monday morning, you get a 20-minute episode and you will have 2 achievable health actions to focus on for the week. So there's no overwhelm, conflicting advice, just simple, structured kind of reset and a dose of weekly motivation, inspiration, if you like, to help you build healthy habits that will really make a difference to your health, I believe. You'll also have access to my tried and tested supplements and foods with an exclusive 15% discount. That I won't be recommending supplements every week, but sometimes I do believe they have their place. And you will also have access to my recipes in PDF, and I sometimes talk through the recipes. So yeah, if you'd like to join, it's £5.99 a month, which I think, represents great value. You can give it a try. You can unsubscribe anytime, but £5.99 a month, and you get your 20-minute episode every Monday morning. I shall leave the link in the show notes. We are on week 4, or we will be on week 4 on Monday. So if you'd like to catch up on week 1, 2, 3, you still can. It'd be lovely to have you. So do come and have a look. And like I said, the link is in the show notes. Thank you. Secondly, my book, Feel Good for Menopause, is packed with real-life tips, simple shifts, hormone-friendly guidance, and plenty of delicious recipes to help you feel more like yourself again. So if you just need that bit of inspiration, do get yourself a copy. It's available on Amazon, or you can click the link in the show notes. Okay, let's get back to the podcast. There was nothing worse, is there, than being completely constipated for days on end. Yeah.
The other thing I was going to mention is quite common with some people is if you ignore the urge to go. So a lot of people can only have a poo at home.
Especially women.
Don't like to go in a public toilet, would be horrified to go at work where someone might hear you. You know, this is a real issue, because then the poo carries on sitting in your large intestine, getting harder and harder as more water is absorbed. And actually that creates a worse situation next time you go. It's bigger, it's harder, slow moving. So ignoring the urge to go is another sort of possible cause.
And also I find traveling can constipated, get very dehydrated, and just the stress of traveling. I find there are 2 kind of people in the world: the people that get stressed and their bowel contracts and nothing happens, and the people that get stressed and their bowel relaxes. And they're going all the time, kind of thing. But
it's that fight, flight, or freeze. Some people do really hold it all in and tense up, and other people are just like, need to get it out, evacuate, get it out, and maybe it's just how we respond is different.
Hardwired, exactly. So someone who's, just before we go back to IBS then, so someone who's just got constipation, let's say, fats and proteins, and just eating enough to nourish their body. Also, you talked about methane. The methane's building up, and that can be tied into lots of things, can't it? Like sort of bacterial overgrowth in the small intestine, and you also get it in the colon, in the large bowel as well. And I suppose that is something that kind of has to be dealt with in terms of testing and.
Is to do the breath test where you, so if you want to know if you've got high levels of methane, you can do a breath test, which measures how much gas you're breathing out. Because when you have a lot of gas in your intestines, some of it will be absorbed into your bloodstream, go to your lungs, and then that's how it's cleared out from the body. And it can be helpful to know this if you want to treat it. I definitely don't suggest anyone start treating it on the basis that they might have it, because the treatments are quite harsh, and we wouldn't want to do that if you didn't have methane overgrowth.
I mean, I must admit, when I do stool testing, not me personally, but the labs, and the results come back. Yeah, a lot of people do have these bacteria, don't they, that produce methane. It's again, it's sort of fairly, it's not in everyone, but it's kind of common.
Yeah, and it can be common in healthy people as well who don't have any issues. So they've done some research looking at long distance cyclers. So it's almost like an endurance athlete. They have typically high levels of methane compared to controls, but they don't have gut issues. So there could be beneficial mechanisms for having these microbes in healthy people. So we don't need to get rid of them all the time. It's just if you have them and it's, you know, the symptoms, so it all needs to be taken in context.
You always need to be symptom led, don't you? If someone's got something you actually feel 100% okay in this conversation, in this area, then and also, what can we do to stimulate the gallbladder a bit more? If someone's got a sluggish gallbladder, or maybe they are taking one of the weight loss drugs, what can they do to stimulate that sort of, you know, that gallbladder sort of production of bile so that they don't have these issues?
Yeah, tricky. In terms of like practical things, I would say regular eating, like 3 good regular meals, not being completely fat free. So include healthy fats like nuts and seeds, avocados, oily fish, that sort of thing, because it does help to stimulate bile. Enough hydration in your cells, in your body, to make some of these digestive issues that we need, juices that we need, like stomach acid, all of those things. Also, there are a couple of things that help bile flow, like artichoke is known to help stimulate bile flow. Hesitate to recommend supplements, but there are supplements that may be helpful in some people. Phosphatidylcholine, which is, you know, really long word, I often just call it PC, will help to thin out the bile flow a little bit, and that can be taken at quite small doses in the form of lecithin powder, and you can start off with a really small dose if you're very sensitive, but that again helps to thin the bile. So that's something that I've used on occasion with people. Yeah,
brilliant. Okay, that's fantastic advice there for anyone who just sort of thinks they might have constipation. But let's go back to IBS, and you've kind of given us a definition. So what are the most common symptoms that you see then in your clinic?
Typically bloating and gas. I would say almost everyone has that.
Yes.
And then it's either constipation or diarrhea alongside it.
Yeah, and pain you mentioned.
And pain, stomach pains. It could be related to actually releasing the poo, sitting on the toilet, a lot of pain, or just ongoing every time you eat, a kind of gnawing pain, and trying to work out where the pain is really challenging. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, I don't have any scanning, but we're looking at, because all the intestines are jumbled up, like the large intestine is not at the lowest part of your body. It's all combined.
So when someone presents with these symptoms and you think, okay, they might have IBS, so how do you approach it?
Normally people come to me and they already know that they have got IBS because they've had other things ruled out, like celiac disease, inflammatory bowel disease, microscopic colitis, cancers. These are all things like your doctor will test for. So once you know you've got IBS and it's down to lifestyle and diet management, then I'll think about, you know, what changes we can make to try and improve the diet, improve the fiber levels, because often people have cut it right down, and just general energy and like often nutrient deficiencies as well. If people have been avoiding a lot of foods for a long time, it might be low. Common things are zinc, iron, B vitamins. They're very common, or maybe calcium as well if they've gone dairy free.
And again, if you've been under eating, you miss out on all those nutrients, don't you? So, what do you think actually causes IBS then in someone? What's the sort of underlying sort of reason for someone getting IBS?
There's a couple of different ways of defining it. The most common, newest one is a disorder of the gut-brain connection. So it's to do with the vagus nerve, often linked to how we're feeling. It doesn't mean that it's in people's head, but it just means your thoughts and your feelings have a super big impact on the function of your digestion, on the production of enzymes, stomach acid, motility. All of that is controlled by how we think and the vagus nerve. There's also another definition, which is a biopsychosocial model, which means, it also incorporates things like your economic situation, your ability to access fresh foods, your stress levels, whether you've had childhood adverse events, all of these are risk factors for IBS, as well as genetic factors. So some people don't produce as much stomach acid. Some people will have slow motility. It just runs in the family. Like some of these things can be genetic as well. So there is no one cause, but a really common cause that people don't really relate too much is a past incident of food poisoning. So that has called post-infectious IBS. So you might have had a dodgy kebab or like a funny prawn on holiday, and then you've got stomach upset, sickness, diarrhea, and then even up to 2 years later, that is a risk factor for developing IBS.
And can that come on later? Can it be sort of,
It can be a bit later. I think the studies sort of probably only go up to like 2 to 3 years later, where they've tracked people. But certainly it is a risk factor, having had an upset to your gut microbiome, whether that's in the small or large intestine through an infection like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's very individual. When I get people that have had gut issues for a long time, and we do the questionnaire, don't we? So we know if they've had an infectious kind of, issue that they've had diarrhea after holiday or whatever. And we also know whether they've taken antibiotics. And I often see people that have taken a lot of antibiotics in childhood often have, gut issues, IBS, and then they're kind of okay with it. There's no symptoms, and then, or they don't have it, but it's sort of, it's sort of setting the gut up a bit. And then a really stressful event happens. And then it all kind of cascades into, to all these IBS symptoms that we've been talking about. So
yeah, it's always interesting to ask, what else was going on for you around this time when all of these issues started, because sometimes it is linked back to a really significant life change or bereavement, divorce, something like that.
There's so many things that can affect the microbiome and just destabilize the balance that you've maybe had for a long time, and it just takes an event. But when someone kind of suspects that they have IBS, should their first stop be going to see the doctor? Or, what would you recommend? If someone's listening to this and think, well, I think I've got IBS. What should I do next?
Yeah, I think, yes, if you've had long-term gut symptoms and a doctor's never looked at them, then yes, you should. The first thing you should do is go and see your doctor. Now, there are some sort of what's called the NICE guidelines for IBS, which is really simple dietary changes that anyone could do alongside waiting to see a doctor. And they're things like cutting down on alcohol, reducing your caffeine intake, eating your 5 a day. Like most people do not eat 5 portions of fruit and veg a day, trying to avoid too many additives and hyper processed foods, that sort of thing. So everyone could do that little like diet cleanup alongside waiting to see a doctor. But get some blood tests from the doctor, maybe to rule out things like inflammatory bowel disease or celiac disease. There's a whole host of tests that your doctor could do based on symptoms.
Yeah, and usually once they've eliminated all those things, you get the banner of IBS. Yeah,
and then often they will say, here's the FODMAP diet, go and try this diet. So shall I explain about that?
And also if you could unravel the acronym for everybody. I think not people have heard of FODMAP, haven't they? But
kind of well-tested diet for people who have IBS, and it's an acronym. It stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. And that is why we call it FODMAP, because it's a mouthful. But essentially they are hyper-fermentable foods that are rapidly fermented by your gut bacteria, and they will draw water into the bowel to create bloating and sometimes diarrhea, or they will be fermented by the gut bacteria, creating a lot of gas, and which can add to pain and cramping and that sort of thing. So they're not bad foods as well. That's really important to say. They are very healthy foods, actually. And high FODMAP foods include apples, chickpeas, high amounts of dairy, that's the lactose, or high amounts of wheat because it's got fructan in it. So there's all these different types of fibres that are very good for our gut, but in high amounts, in people who are sensitive, can trigger symptoms.
Okay. And sorry.
So I was going to say, it's a diet, though, that you should only follow for 2 to 6 weeks. It's not a diet for life that people who've got IBS should be on. It's an intervention to see if we can identify the types of fibres that you are sensitive to. So, for example, you might remove all of the high FODMAP foods for a short amount of time, and then we really carefully test putting them back in to see if you react to them. And a lot of people are surprised that actually I don't react to lactose. I always thought dairy was a problem, but I don't have a problem with lactose. Or actually chickpeas are okay at this level, but if I have too much, then too many lentils, then I get symptoms. So we're trying to work out what each person's individual tolerance is to give them a better diet.
Yeah, brilliant. And so tell us about, a success story, someone that's come to you, they've had IBS, how you've approached it, what sort of, turned the corner for them in terms of getting on top of their symptoms and improving their gut health.
Yeah, a lot of the time people will say only be going to the toilet once a week with constipation, really struggling, bloated, uncomfortable, often a bit of reflux, because if you think like your torso is full of the stool, there's only so much space we've got for our organs, and it pushes upwards and it can just create that inter-abdominal pressure, which causes a bit more reflux. So those are the kind of common symptoms. And what I've typically do with people would be to start introducing low FODMAP fibers. So these are foods that are less likely to make you bloat, and might include things like carrots, broccoli, and people are always a bit surprised about broccoli, but it's not actually that bad. Green beans, fruits like papaya, pineapple, kiwis are amazing for constipation.
Kiwis are great for constipation, aren't they? I always always advise someone to take a couple of kiwis a day, or have a couple of kiwis if they're constipated. That works quite
definitely. Well. And then, but often what I'll do, like a client I had last year, we would start off thinking about the laxatives, as we said before, like to try and get things moving. Working out what their dose needs to be to get them to a regular bowel movement. And then that gives you a bit more freedom to try the foods. So then we can start with volume to make sure they're eating enough, make sure they're eating 5 a day, whether it's low FODMAP or not, and then gradually getting to the FODMAP reintroduction stage. And so I wouldn't start off asking people to eat lentils and whole glasses of milk or anything, but my aim is to get people to retest all of that throughout the process. And it can be so rewarding, like people saying, yep, I'm going every day, it's not painful, it's just normal. Like, to not think about poo is really good for people.
And it can really take over people's minds, can't it? And they get caught up in that loop of, oh my God.
Because we have to eat, like you can't get away from it. So every time you eat, if you feel scared, it's really challenging, because then you try not to eat because it's too painful or upsetting.
Horrible. So that's the constipation type IBS. What about diarrhea again, which says a lot of people get quite freaked out, like every time they eat something they're worried because they've got to travel and they're being really careful, so they're really limiting their foods. What's your sort of suggestions for people who fall into that?
Well, interestingly, adding fibre is also helpful in these cases. So often people are very low fibre when they're getting loose stools. But again, low FODMAP or soluble fibre can be really helpful, because it's this gel forming type of fibre that's going to create more solid stool. So often we think about psyllium husk as a laxative because it is the main ingredient in the product fibre gel. But actually, for diarrhea, it can also be very helpful because it creates more bulk. It's kind of slowing things down. So something like that is helpful to test out with people. Can they tolerate psyllium husk? Because it does create that slowness.
And how much would you recommend taking? So psyllium husk, usually you can get it like in a powder, can't you?
Yeah.
And you can add it to, I don't know, a glass of water, or, porridge or a smoothie, because you want to make it sort of dissolve into something, right?
Yeah, it's not very pleasant to drink. You can get it in a capsule form as well, because some clients I work with just don't like the sensoriness. It's like a bit wallpaper paste drinking that. So you can get it in a capsule form.
How much would you recommend taking, Anna?
Definitely start with a very small amount. So if you're going for the powder, just like a quarter of a teaspoon, half a teaspoon. Not everyone will get on well with it because it is a little bit fermentable, so it's not completely low FODMAP, for example, but your gut bacteria may try to metabolize it and enjoy it. But you can go up to very big doses, like 10 grams, which is probably like a tablespoon of psyllium husk. If you're doing it in capsules, you can try a lot of the around 10 grams. A lot of the studies are 10 to 15 grams, so you can have quite a bit, but start very small, I would.
Right. Okay. So low and slow.
Yeah, like with all supplements,
Yeah,
really, especially if you're sensitive.
especially if you've got a sensitive gut, you don't want to. Yeah. What's your
Yeah.
opinion on PHGG, partialized
Yeah, partially hydrolyzed guar gum.
hydrolyzed
Yeah,
guar gum?
I do use this quite a lot. It doesn't necessarily change the bowel consistency, like the stool consistency, as much as psyllium, but it is a good low FODMAP prebiotic. So it's a way of feeding the good bacteria without creating too much gas and bloating. So I quite like using it, yes, with different people, depending on their symptoms.
Yeah. So yeah, you'd use both by the sounds of it.
Yes, not normally together, like normally one or the other, just because it can get a bit much. I don't often do stool tests, but recently I did one with someone and their diversity was very, very low. So they were already taking PHGG, but then we introduced another type of prebiotic as well. So kind of just trying to grow up the good gut bacteria by feeding high levels of fermentable fibers. So yeah, again,
Can you
it has
just
to be done
explain to
very
people? You
slowly.
said low diversity, and a lot of people think, "Oh, what did you mean by that?" Can you explain what you meant?
Yeah, it just means that there is not very many types of bacteria in the gut. So when they take a sample of your poo and look at it, they look for the DNA of different types of gut microbes, and they scan it for, I don't know, I think 20,000 different microbes. If the DNA is found, then you've got some evidence of that gut bacteria. Or microbe, it could be virus, could be parasite. They're looking for all of those. So yeah, the diversity score of this person who had multiple years of consistently taking antibiotics prior to working with me, their diversity score was very low. Like I think the lowest I've ever seen. So they on the scoring, they only had 99 species of gut microbes, which is very low. Often we're looking for at least 200 or if not more. People want to have a good variety and a good spread of all those different microbes. And the reason for having a lot of different and the reason it's good is because each of those gut bacteria work together. It's like any sort of environment, a community. You don't just want one group overtaking, leading everything. So a good bit of diversity is helpful for everyone because it creates a good environment where they can all thrive.
And you kind of drive diversity by having a very varied diet. I think, Zoe has been quite big on promoting 30 different plant foods a week, which for someone like us, people like us, it's like so easy. But if you're not, not used to it, a lot of people do have the same things like carrot and broccoli as their vegetables, and the same cereals every morning, and maybe a sandwich at lunch. It's yeah, you do have to think about it.
It's often easy to get to about 20. And if I do this exercise with people, they will, after a few days, say, yeah, I'm fine. I'm already on 20 and I'm on day 4. But then all of those just get repeated again for the rest of the week.
It's anything that grows from the ground, basically. I mean, it's understanding it, but that can really help with diversity. Beyond food, what other lifestyle factors can be helpful for someone with IBS?
Really simple things. So starting with how you eat is a very big improvement that you can make just through chewing your food. So sitting down to eat, eating at regular times of the day, ideally, and chewing your food properly before it is swallowed. That doesn't have to be, there's a sort of research around chewing your food 30 times before you swallow it. That is quite labor intensive, and it's not normal for people to do that mostly, but getting it to the stage where there's no big lumps just takes some of the pressure off your stomach, because then your chemical digestion has to work, and the motility, kind of squeezing the food together, mashing it up. If you can do that in your mouth with your teeth, then that's a really helpful thing.
You're already starting the process, aren't you?
Yeah, a lot of people eat really quickly in the car, like standing up at the sideboard just before you go out the door. Like that is not conducive to good digestion. So a lot of the initial stuff I do with people is just trying to get a good eating habit. Sitting down, chewing your food really well. Other key things that people don't recognise often that are related to your digestion would be sleep. So when you don't sleep well, you typically feel more pain, you feel more sensitive, maybe choose different foods as well because you're tired, you want quick energy boost, so you might not make as much effort. So sleep, really, really important. And also movement, ideally getting 30 minutes a day. And it can just be walking. Like walking is really good for the gut. It doesn't have to be high intensity, but something that gets your body moving. And a lot of people do not do a small amount of movement every day. but it's so good for letting the gas out if you're bloated. Yeah, it could be yoga. That's great for releasing a bit of gas, moving the things around in your torso, but also just can help with
I mean, it's normal to
get
have a
better
bit of
sleep.
gas, isn't it? I mean, it's normal, completely normal to have some gas.
Yes, I think 15 to 20 times a day is the average time that the amount that people fart.
Yeah.
So that's a normal person, not someone with IBS. Often when you've got IBS or particularly a lot of microbes that produce hydrogen sulfide gas, the gas can be very smelly. And if it's very frequent and very smelly, that's not normal. But yeah, 20 times a day, perfectly normal. And again, depending on how much fiber you're eating, like the fermentable foods that your gut bacteria love are the ones that create a bit more gas.
Yes. Yeah. So it's, I think people do tend to know when the gas and the bloating is off the charts, or it's too much for them.
Yeah.
It's a big change, like you said at the beginning, and they start having to loosen their belts, and they really feel their waist expanding, and that sort of pregnant belly that people talk about, and also stress, I suppose.
Yes, definitely. So incorporating some diaphragmatic breathing is something else that's very helpful because it allows your torso to work as it should, especially if you're sitting upright or lying down on the floor, just allowing things to settle, the muscles to work in the right way. But it can kind of massage your stomach from the inside. And diaphragmatic breathing just means using the muscle that kind of goes underneath your lungs across the torso sideways, and using that to breathe in really deeply rather than the sort of shallow breathing that we might do when we're feeling a little bit anxious or stressed. So like really using the whole body, slow exhalations, that sort of thing. So yeah, breathing and stress management techniques, exercise and sleep are some of the other things that really form part of what I'm trying to work with people on, like how to make it work for you.
Yeah, I mean, it all sounds so easy, but that's quite a lot for someone to do, isn't it? And it is kind of, I think that's why working with nutritional therapists like ourselves, it's kind of like that ongoing advice and motivation and coaching that really helps people turn the corner.
Yeah, all of that is general health advice. There's nothing groundbreaking about, you should do some exercise, sleep for 8 hours a night and try and manage your stress. But it's how do you make it work for you and fit it into your lifestyle? That is where you get the support of a nutritionist.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And sort of mentioned a few times that eating regularly, can help with the symptoms. Can you explain why eating regularly, what that does to the body and why it's likely to lessen symptoms?
Yeah, in the extreme cases where people are under eating to the point of having an eating disorder like anorexia, where they're really not eating, what can happen is your gut motility slows down. So first of all, your stomach emptying slows down, and people can end up with a condition called gastroparesis, where the stomach is just not emptying quickly and food is sitting there for a really long time, makes you feel heavy, makes you feel full, even though you've eaten a very small meal. So the stomach emptying slows down, and then movement through the gut can slow down just because there's no impetus, there's nothing coming through that's pushing the food along. And then without the proper nutrients, if you're not eating a variety of nutrients, you may be missing things like B12 or iron, which are really important for the functioning of those smooth muscles that are pushing the food through. So that can impact, and that can also then lead to an overgrowth in the microbes if it's not really pushing through enough and cleaning the body as it moves through. So it's not just people who get constipation who I see who are under eating. It can also be people who have diarrhea, and that gut brain connection, like really exacerbating every time you eat, like the anxiety goes up and then that your body's trying to evacuate it. So yeah, under eating can lead to nutrient deficiencies, but also just the slowing down because there's not enough volume coming through. So those are the main things that I see, and it's quite tricky to get over if you're scared to eat firstly, and every time you eat you have a bad experience, you don't really want to eat.
No,
so
of course not. Yeah,
it might not be anything to do with weight loss, but also we know like midlife women are generally kind of conditioned to try and be smaller, take up less space, have a smaller body, and so we think, oh well, maybe I'm doing myself good by eating as little as I can. But actually it can lead to,
I mean, that has been drummed into us from an early age, like eat less stuff on your plate. Yeah, it's all good. That's the positive stuff. In my experience, people that have eaten less over decades are the ones that struggle with their weight the most. Rather than people that
because
eat
of the
regularly.
restriction.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about fasting. What's your opinion on fasting? Because obviously that will have an impact on the gut. Some say good, some say not so good. What's your,
I personally, for people I work with, it's rarely helpful. Obviously there are individual cases, but it's not something I recommend, because if you are sensitive to the food that you eat, squashing it down into a shortened feeding window and trying to eat all your protein needs and your 5 a day and get your 30 grams of fiber, all of that in 6 or 8 hours, you're pushing a lot through the gut in a short amount of time. I think it's better to spread it out and have 3 normal sized meals and
breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Yeah,
rather than trying to cram all of that food into a short amount of time. And if you're going down to 2 meals a day, that's even harder to hit your protein and fiber requirements without upsetting your stomach. So it's not normally something I would recommend for people who have IBS. But obviously some people get on well with it and eat well, and that's great. It's not I'm not against it. I just don't see it working.
No, and I can think of people that have fasted, like done like a 24-hour fast and had all sorts of gut issues and been vomited and not had a good experience. Whereas you look at all the evidence, although a lot of the data's on men, not on women, especially midlife women, kind of not there. And I've over the years I've taught let's do 2 meals a day, and actually what I've concluded now is that most midlife women do better on 3 meals a day. They're just kind of more balanced in every way. I
mean, as humans, we're not like cows, which are constantly eating and ruminating, and we're not like snakes, which just eat once a week. Like, our digestion somewhere in the middle. We do need to eat regularly, and that's what keeps us going. We're not people who eat once a day, or I don't think it's very helpful. There's a lot of buzz about glucose management as well, and I don't think it's really useful to focus in on that majority of the time. Most people eating normally have not got any problems. If they've not, unless they're diabetic, that's completely different. But we don't need to worry about all of that stuff so much through fasting.
Okay, Anna, that has been such a useful conversation, and you've been so succinct in explaining everything, and I'm sure that will be helpful to people listening. And whether they've got, gut issues, general gut issues, or they might have IBS. If somebody wanted to work with you, are you taking on new clients?
Yes, I work with people over 3 months.
Okay.
And it's a 3-month program, so I don't do like individual one-off sessions. But as part of that, we'll look at people's diets, all their symptoms, do a big kind of kickoff in the beginning of the first week, and then I meet with people weekly to begin with. So it's quite intensive up front, and we have a lot of time to work on the plan together.
Brilliant. Yes. And like we said, that is needed, isn't it? That kind of coaching and ongoing support. Yeah. So how do people find you, Anna?
Yep. And my business is called Goodness Me Nutrition. So it's goodnessme-nutrition.com. And I also have a podcast called Inside Knowledge for people with IBS. And if I can do a little plug, my book as well, which was just out, also called Inside Knowledge for people with IBS and SIBO. That is on Amazon.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you, Anna. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for your company. I know there are so many podcasts out there, so my promise to you is no nonsense, practical advice that adds real value to your life. So if you enjoyed this episode, you know the drill. Now, I'd really appreciate it if you could like, follow, or click subscribe, or even send it to someone who might benefit from this information. It truly helps me grow the podcast and keeps me going. And if you'd like to know more about my own personal approach to food, HRT, movement stress, and self-connection, my book is available in paperback. I'd also love to hear from you, so don't hesitate to leave a comment or get in touch. And that just leaves me to say I am sending lots of love and light from my midlife goddess to yours.